This is EdUp, Accelerated Excellence.
Yeah, I think this is, our one of our kind of mantras is mindsets matter most, the triple M's. Mindsets matter most. And when you look at the Black pedagogical frameworks, political clarity was always one of them. Having a keen sense of understanding, because some people say like, oh, education not politics. Well, it was politics and policy that made it illegal. It's politics and policy that determine what type of a school you get based off the zip code. It's politics and policy, and of course, these mindsets inform both of those that determine, that sends the message to youth. You get the education that your parents can afford.
Leaders, entrepreneurs, and change agents looking for the opportunity to network and exchange ideas with other trailblazers and to further your brand. The 2.0 conference is for you. Experts from the fields of education, health, internet, marketing, and CXO are welcome to take part in the 2025 conference in Las Vegas, March 4th through 6th. Reserve your space today and receive a 10% discount courtesy of EdUp Accelerated Excellence with the code EdUpXE10OFF. That's EdUpXE10OFF. Learn more and register online at www.the2conf.com. That's the2conf.com with the code EdUpXE10OFF.
Welcome to EdUp, Accelerated Excellence, a podcast for the advancement of educational effectiveness and equity across both traditional and non-traditional learning experiences and spaces. I am your host, Jacob Easley II, PhD, PMP, and in this episode, we sit down with Sharif El-Mekki. He is the founder and CEO of the Center for Black Educator Development. The center exists to ensure that there is equity in recruiting, training, hiring, and retention of quality educators that reflect the cultural backgrounds shared among the diverse population of students here in the United States. Prior to his role at the Center for Black Educator Development, Sharif was a nationally recognized principal and U.S. Department of Education Principal Ambassador Fellow. Sharif, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here, and shout out to the community that you've been cultivating, on this platform. I entered I was invited into the profession about 31 years ago. And 26 out of those 31 were as a classroom teacher and a school principal. Quarter of a century in schools. It was I was in 3 different schools, but they were all neighborhood schools. And I think just how I was introduced to the profession, not only as a nascent teacher, fledgling teacher, and but also the seeds that were planted by my teachers, even when I thought teaching, it never even dawned on me that would be something that I would pursue. But I would say, my experience as a student informed that eventual acceptance to the invitation, but then also the formal invite that Black folks offered me to become a teacher. And then was grounded in community as well. And then I would say at the Center for Black Educator Development, today what we're really trying to work on, the problem we want to solve is rebuilding a national Black teacher pipeline that's thinking about the Black pedagogical framework, the Black historical lens of, as Dr. Koso Lassane talks about, Black teaching traditions, but then also the connectivity between educational justice and racial justice, and how those are inextricably linked and forever intertwined, and having that kind of orientation about teaching and learning and community-based schooling. So, yeah, glad to be here. Glad to be in this work. It's an honor to be in this work, and committed to it, man. 31
Yeah,
years.
I'm there with you. Your story is really compelling to me because it really speaks to this idea of a community uplifting you, but seeing something in you. So the calling was not necessarily something that was necessarily innate, but others who can see what is inside of you and the potential of one to be able to surround and nurture someone to be successful in their professional endeavor over time. So I think that's absolutely beautiful. And so the origin of the Center for Black Educator Development was to expand the pipeline for Black educators. So with that origin, and I know it still continues today in all the work that you do, but what are you most proud of about the center? If you would look at the center, looking back on what you've achieved and thinking about where you are now.
Yeah, and we're still babies in this. It's been a fascinating learn. I'm I love one thing I'm proud about is being consistent with community. I think about just yeah, I mean, all the data around, Black led, Black founded nonprofits, longevity is short, revenue, all the things, but how the community has supported us,
Mhm.
poured into us, opened doors for us, spoken about us behind closed door, like all those things has been when I really just sit back and think, like once again, the constant theme of community, this idea of lifting as we climb. Not only are we trying to live that, but the folks in our ecosystem are also, live by that mantra that Mary Church Terrell used to, that was one of her refrains. And then I would also say really proud of, the intergenerational approach that we've been having. So not only us as a staff, but we are engaging and veteran educators. But the fact that college students, are connecting with us, doing our program, high school students. So these are aspiring, and some of them I wouldn't even say they're aspiring teachers yet. They're exploring career opportunities.
Right.
They're exploring ways to like, wait a minute, how do I take my activism and apply it somewhere? Oh, let me look at leading a classroom as that way. So, and then they're teaching first, second, and third graders in our summer program, right? So it's just the intergenerational piece is again back to community, and then I'd say the third part that I'm extremely proud about is how our team has been thinking about like the ecosystem that, if you're going to recruit teachers, it can't be disconnected from the social, political, and economic realities of Black youth. We can't just say, hey, come be a teacher, and not even thinking about what's the cost of college? What's the cost of becoming a teacher? What's the intellectual, spiritual, emotional cost of being in a school that is anti-Black or a district, because the similarities between a Black teacher or a Black person in America has a lot of, very similar to being a Black person in America, Black in American schools, Black in America. Unfortunately, some of the negatives on both sides is like that Venn diagram. You have a lot of similarities, like, yeah, yep, experienced that in society. Oh, yep, I was experienced that in school as a student as well as a professional. And so, thinking about, so when we look at our mission to rebuild a national Black teacher pipeline, we're like, this pipeline has to be insulated. It has to be bolstered. And we bolster it with these three pillars. One is around policy and advocacy. What are the voices of students and educators saying? Our high school students came up with a campaign. We need Black teachers. So if your audience looks up hashtag We Need Black Teachers, they'll see like this is the impact of high school students and their voice, and their demand. They said this is their rallying cry and demand that we need Black teachers. So we said, like, hey, if you need them, become one, because if you need them, so will the next generation. So will your children's children. So consider becoming what you needed. And one of them said, like, yeah, I'm really thinking about becoming a teacher I wish I had and knew I needed. Right. And so for a high school youth to have that kind of insight about their experience, as well as how they can, again, back to lifting as they climb. So policy and advocacy is one. Another one is professional learning. How do we make sure that the ecosystem is developing? What are the mindsets and skills necessary to be an effective educator, but also an effective colleague?
Right.
Because you can be a teacher and be anti-Black. And that anti-Blackness isn't just reserved for students, it could be reserved for your Black colleague, you
Right.
know? And then the third part, which is 90% of our work will really be around pathways. Like, how do we invite youth into the profession? How do we give them clinical experiences? How do we provide, career exploration opportunities through their coursework in their high schools? Then the fellowship, Black Teacher Pipeline Fellowship students who participate in either the CTE course or our Freedom School Literacy Academy, our summer paid apprenticeship. Students could be a fellow, and a fellow is not just a scholarship; it's a fellowship. Like, there's requirements, there's engagement, monthly, connection points. But they get 5K a year as they matriculate through college. Once they get to their fifth year of teaching, they get a $20,000 retention stipend. All this just to say, like, it can't be disconnected from the social, economic, and political reality. So our team has just done a fabulous job of really thinking of a comprehensive approach to rebuild, but also bolster and insulate a Black teacher pipeline.
You took the word right out of my mouth. And when you said this, I thought about a couple of things. Build it, they will come. So if you build it, they will come. They are coming and continue to come. But a systems approach, but a comprehensive, systematic, and systems approach to educator preparation. So, and I think that's phenomenal because it's centered in sense of community. And in what you're saying in so many ways is that in preparing Black educators, you're developing the whole individual within a community. So, and you don't often see that in the traditional work of educator preparation. I've spent most of my career in universities, and we profess whole child development for P-12 students, but we don't necessarily articulate that work in the development of those who are becoming teachers. So that's actually absolutely wonderful. So in a few days from now, this podcast, we're going to release an episode that centers the science of reading. So I've heard you talk about Black literacy before.
Yeah, right.
So particularly in reading instruction. So how is Black literacy conceptualized through the center's Freedom School Literacy Academy?
Yeah, this is a really important piece for us. We actually, centered literacy because we just feel like, literacy is closely linked to liberation. And liberation, meaning freedom of choices, opportunities. When we look at just like all of the impact of not having a highly literate society has, and then the history of, before you Black person trying to become literate, that's might be loss of limb or life, but to now it's couched in a different way. It's like, oh, you can become literate, but we're not going to train teachers in becoming, being an effective teacher. We're going to underfund your school. We're going to close your libraries, right? So they send a different message, not going to kill you, but it can kill you when you don't have it, right? And then also, I wanted our youth, as well as educators, but also our youth, to really understand how our history, Black history, and I would say any group that's fighting for liberation and full citizenship, they had to take on the literacy of their community into their own hands, and they could not rely on anyone else, right? Like, they had to teach themselves. They had that password. At first, they were doing it in underground, right? Like, wanted them to tie it to, like, here were like underground school. We had the Underground Railroad. We had underground schools and literacy camps that people were even if they only knew a word, they were passing that word to someone else. Like, hey, this is the only word I was able to pick up, but here it is. Here's how you spell it. Here's how, right? Like that kind of thing. Whether it's you read about schools on the Mississippi River, like on a riverboat, schools that were being taught in caves underground or in the woods, Frederick Douglass getting, white children or white women to teach them, a little bit here or there, all of those kind of things. You needed those to write passes, to steal yourself away, so to speak,
Right.
all the way to what SNCC did, with freedom schools. And with them recognize, like, wait a minute, we're registering parents and grandparents to vote, but their children and grandchildren are getting sharecropper education, and so we need to address that, right? And then even my own experience being a 3-year-old, 4-year-old learning how to read in the community, where they were teaching us, what we're calling now the Freedom School alphabet song, and just like what that meant. And, your audience can look at Right to Read Philly. And I've been just an advisor, but really connecting them to, hey, here's what was going on in the city. And not just on my cousin's front porch, there's front porch lessons, as we call them, but everywhere throughout the city. And we were learning, instead of just the names of the letters, like A, B, C, those are the names of the letters. We were learning a phonics version, and it went like this, Abaca da efaga ha ija ka lamina pa sata ava wa za ya za. Imagine a 3 and 4-year-old not only learning this song, but our teacher, one of them being our cousin, Dr. Suzette Abdul Hakim. Imagine being a 3 and 4-year-old and your teacher also saying, like, okay, this letter, here's how the sound it makes, but where's your tongue as you pronounce it? Where's your tongue as you say these? Okay, where's your tongue when you say friend, right? And so they're blending sounds, blending words, letters and words, but also having us practice where our mouths are, where our lips are, where's our tongue, what does that feel like? Do you have a vibration? Do you not have a vibration? All of that. And then my good friend Citizen Stewart says the revolution will be literate. Well, rebuilding the Black teacher pipeline it's a movement. It's a revolutionary act. So that means the revolution has to be literate. And so literacy is absolutely essential to any effort to improve the conditions that we face. And so just wanted to be super transparent about that with our youth, about like, hey, even if you're considering, no matter what you teach, no matter what you do, I want you to have an understanding of literacy and how literacy impacts the next generation. So no matter what we do in life, we can impact that for others. It's absolutely critical.
Yeah, I mean, literacy is the key to information, but it's not gathering information, but also disseminating and articulating information.
And discerning. About discernment about the information that's being, especially now when we're getting bombarded with information, false information, propaganda, all of that. Like the discernment is tied to literacy.
So when you think about, you use the word revolutionary and this idea of a movement. So when you think about teaching as a political act, how can we best prepare teachers to understand and embrace their inherent agency as cultural and justice brokers?
Yeah, I think this is, one of our kind of mantras is mindsets matter most, the triple M's. Mindsets matter most. And when you look at the Black pedagogical frameworks, political clarity was always one of them. Having a keen sense of understanding, because some people say, like, oh, education, not politics. Well, it was politics and policy that made it illegal. It's politics and policy that determine what type of a school you get based off the zip code. It's politics and policy, and of course, these mindsets inform both of those, that determine, that sends the message to youth: you get the education that your parents can afford.
Right.
That's what you deserve, the level of education that your parents can afford. Whether that's everybody's like, oh, my kid doesn't go to private school. If you move to a zip code that has a higher tax base and the school is proportionally connected to that, then that was a decision. And that's directly tied to what you feel your kids deserve and what those policymakers feel that those kids, those students, and those educators in that space deserve. And so that political clarity for us is an important part, because I don't feel like you can teach well if you are oblivious to the history. And so even, again, quoting Citizen Stewart again, he says, like, we go to 13 years of education, but one of the things that our students never learn is the history of schools.
Oh, wow.
And so you're in school, but you don't learn about the history of this school, the history of education. And for us, that was a part of teaching, understanding, like, this is where we were, this is what happened. Here are traditions that teaching and learning in our communities that have always existed. And here's what did not make it into the, educational canon, so to speak, but that is in our canon. Here are the white educational theory, white behavior theory that typically people are armed with and then sent to teach Black and brown kids. And these are educational theorists, child psychologists who never even envisioned Black and brown children being, the majority, of public school students. So for them to only use that and not think about, what did Dr. Amos Wilson say about teaching and learning? What did he
Yeah.
say about, growth and development? What did Dr. Carter G. Woodson? Everyone talks about his, father of Black History Month. That's great. He was also a teacher and a principal. And he went around the country training and developing teachers and principals about how to teach Black children. You rarely see that. A lot of, professors, 90% of them who are white in ed prep spaces, they're oblivious to, these Black educational theorists, Black behavior theorists, Black child psychologists. Our job is to make sure that we remember, and that we insert that. We build our curriculum, our professional development around that. And it includes, political clarity.
Experts from the fields of education, health, internet, marketing, and CXO are welcome to take part in the 2025 2.0 conference in Las Vegas, March 4th through 6. Reserve your space today and receive a 10% discount courtesy of EdUp Accelerated Excellence with the code EdUpXE10OFF. That's EdUpXE10OFF. Learn more and register online at www.the2conf.com. That's the2conf.com with the code EdUpXE10OFF.
So Philadelphia, let's talk about Philadelphia a bit.
City of brotherly love, sister affection, and move bombings.
So, when I think about your work and I think about Philadelphia, I think about thinking globally but acting locally. Because you talked about a national teacher pipeline, but you're centered in Philadelphia. So how has growing up in Philadelphia and working in Philadelphia influenced your worldview on educational equity? Because I think Philadelphia is a very unique place historically and contemporarily in society, particularly around governance of the United States, but it as a political space and cultural capital in so many ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, I love, and everybody should love where they're from, but I absolutely love the fact that I grew up in West Philadelphia. Not only from the cultural aspect, but, as you mentioned, but you also talked about, like, just the activism, whether it was growing up on, going to 63rd Street, and being on the indoor porch of Dr. Suzette, to go into the elementary school I went to that was started by activists in the Musasa in Germantown section of Philadelphia, this independent Black school, taking an African martial arts, Vita Sa'ana, that oriented, self-discipline and self-control and hard work, as well as being one of the courses, being in proximity to, the Black Panther Party, the MOVE membership, Dr. Sonia Sanchez, so many, Dr. Greg Carr, there's so many folks here who've just been, embodied, not only Black excellence, but resistance against anti-Blackness, but also doing it in this way that was so foundational in love and community, to be able to grow up never feeling unloved, whether it was school space or community space. And I didn't realize, I thought this was just the norm. To be able to grow up and see, like, wow, like, so many of our Black children grow up and they can tell you when they felt unloved. They can string together many memories about when they felt unloved. A few years ago on I think CNN was doing something, and on social media, people started asking or answering to the question, when did you realize you were Black? And I was reading this, and, and time after time, it was just this painful kind of gut wrenching narratives about when people realized that they were being rejected. And they were often children, but they realized, like, oh, that's when I realized, like, oh, I'm Black.
Mhm.
And I wrote, I never realized I wasn't. Like, I grew up in this affirming space, that I think being in Philadelphia, because of the history, at one point had the, most amount of free Blacks, during the antebellum period, significant portion of the Underground Railroad. People hear about Harriet Tubman, who was traveling up from Maryland, but, William Still was here, and many others who were in the city. Being near William Penn Camp, where the Black soldiers were trained, or Frederick Douglass was recruiting people, including his son, to serve in the Union Army. And many of the Black soldiers were trained right up here, Camp William Penn, right? And so just like this connectivity, the independent Black schools movement, and having, Nathal Musasa and Marcus Garvey Shule and Lotus Academy and these others that were just constantly thinking about, community and what does it look like? What does it feel like? What does it sound like? And so I think all of those experiences, being a child of two Black Panther Party members and a cousin of two more,
Mhm.
all of that, I think just that level of activism, community, love, but also resistance, I think fueled, my orientation and perspective as an educator, nascent educator who came in to the profession through a combination of a coalition between the School District of Philadelphia, nonprofit, Concerned Black Men, it was called, and then Cheney University, the first HBCU, right outside of Philadelphia, right. So like all of these things just continue to layer my experience, inform my vision, and led me to eventually, starting 5 years ago, the Center for Black Educator Development.
I really like that idea of never feeling unloved.
Yeah.
And when you talk about resistance, in so many ways, if you think about it deeply enough, resistance is born out of love.
Mm-hmm.
It's a love for, self, I think, in this case, and self to be affirmed. And so it's for that reason when you're not allowed to be, it creates the conditions for a revolution.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting, as I travel the country, most teachers are white. Most administrators are white. Most people in teacher prep are white,
Yep.
and I often get this, this defensive posturing of, I love Black kids. I'm like, all right, there's different definitions of love. Like, for me, love, one means feeling accountable for their success.
Mhm.
Like, that's how I know I love someone. Like, I feel accountable, especially when we're talking about like children. I feel accountable for their success. Not, well, it's their parents if they did, and no, it's their poverty if they did, no, it's their, oh, it's the system. Like all of the things that people stack up as a barrier toward success. Like, we literally build our own walls, and chasms. Um, so that's one thing. But a big part is also this idea of, well, if you love them, how do you help them develop a positive racial identity in an anti-Black space?
Right.
Because to me, that's a great measuring stick. How do you help a Black child in an anti-Black space that American society is, that the global society is? How do you help them develop a positive racial identity? If I could count the amount of stutters and stares that I get from that simple, what I think is a very simple question,
Right.
that so many educators and trainers and teachers of educators, um, are get stuck on and are unable to answer because they've not even thought deeply about it, because they think like, oh, that's not something that's even part of my calculus. I'm just teaching a lesson. I chose to drive across the bridge and, cross county line and come teach here. So that means I'm, I'm just as effective at other, but I can't answer a simple question about, you know, a Black child that's constantly getting anti-Black messages. How do you help make sure that they understand their worth, their value, their position, their history, their aspirations, and connect it to, the skills that they need, right? All of those things. But, that's one of the things I think that our teachers poured into us was having a positive racial identity, and if we know that that's foundational to learning and learning from people, from your teacher, is, your sense of self-worth and your sense of purpose, right? Like, I'm just like, your sense of purpose is tied to your sense of worth, and so for us, and for me as a teacher, it's always been, it's not just who's leading the classroom, it's also who prepared you to lead the classroom.
Oh, wow.
And what intellectual genealogy are you drawing from to do so? And a lot of our intellectual genealogy is steeped in white supremacist notions.
Yeah. So what's on the horizon for the Center for Black Educator Development?
Yeah, no, thank you. Two big things that are up right now. One, next month will be our 7th annual National Black Male Educator Convening, BMEC, hashtag BMEC 2024, where we, center the voices, perspective, and experiences of Black men educators. It's open to everyone. We're sold out. But people will be able to use that hashtag to follow along, like what's happening if they're not registered. And so continuing to spread the word. I think a big part of our community and network are ambassadors of the Black Teacher Pipeline. So that looks like not only supporting BMEC, but also, we're looking to partner with Black high schools that serve significant number of Black students so that we can introduce them to Black teaching traditions that Dr. Okosola calls it, Black pedagogical frameworks, Black historical lens, career exploration, as far as teaching through our teaching academy. So spreading the word, if you know high schools that are interested, and being ambassadors, go to our website, sign up for the newsletter, share resources with others. www.thecenterblacked.org. We're looking for contributors to the blog page, Philly's 7th Ward, PHILLYS 7THWARD.org, Philly's 7th Ward. Shout out to W.B. Du Bois, who the Philadelphia Negro. He looked at the 7th Ward in Philadelphia, which at that time was the blackest ward in the city. And that's where he set up shop to do his, do his sociological experimentation and research. And, continue to advocate for educational and racial justice. We're all part of that community, that ecosystem, and continue to fight in the river, but also let's meet upstream too as necessary.
Sharif, it is such a great honor to have this time to speak with you and to learn from you. And we appreciate you here at EdUp Accelerated Excellence.
Well, my absolute pleasure, Dr. Easley, and thank you for having me, and looking forward to seeing you soon.
All right, most definitely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
EdUp Accelerated Excellence community, we want to hear from you. If you have feedback on this episode or want to suggest future guests, please contact us online at edupxe.com. That's edupxe.com. Thank you for engaging with the EdUp Accelerated Excellence community. You can find this episode and others on Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Apple Music. And if you like this episode, please don't forget to follow us and share within your network.